to rock and roll.
Okay, we're recording.
All right, here we go. How you doing, everybody? This is Dennis Michelson. Welcome to the science of fantasy football. Why the science of fantasy football? You get a meteorologist and a biologist together. They're going to use the scientific method that is going to be guaranteed to make you a better fantasy football player. I know. How can I give guarantees in something as flaky as fantasy football? Well, scientific method just means we're going to use statistics to get to the answer. We're not going to have a preconceived notion and then go cherry picking the stats to find the support that we need. That's all that app means, folks, as far as it applies to fantasy football. So using stats smarter in a stat-driven game is guaranteed to make you a better player, and guaranteeing who is the best co-host for the science of fantasy football. It's not even a question, folks. It's the professor, the fantasy professor, and a real professor, I might add. It's John Bush. John, 4 wacky weeks in the books, and I think the fantasy football world is just about losing their mind over this season.
And Dennis, it is always great to be here. I'm sitting there looking at your image that you've chosen. I've got a new avatar image, the
You know where
robot
that
professor.
you know where
Where
that
did
image
that
is
come
from?
from?
That is a picture that I took on a very cloudy day
Well,
at
I
the
like the contrast with the
it's a very
red.
very interesting. That was taken at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. That is the catch fence on Pit Road at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.
And Dennis, I think there's a little bit of a photography kind of artist there. The colors, you amaze me. You have width and breadth that I don't think the most people will realize. They're probably your folks at work. This Dennis got a little soul of an artist, certainly a scientist type, a pattern searcher, but looks like there's a little bit of art to that. And I think there's that balance. I call myself a data artist. I understand that. I think there's something having that trait, appreciating that art side, I think is probably what makes us work well together is, as well, I guess. I'm trying to think of another word, but I can't. But I like that. The only thing that worries me is the catch wall. That sounds like loose wheels and flying projectiles, Dennis. And that, not that I don't mind mayhem. I survived the fantasy football expo, a lot of mayhem and wacky things going on, wacky people, lots of mayhem happening there, which I enjoyed. It as my rule was as a young man, it never gets crazy enough for me. What is it, Hunter S. Thompson? When times get crazy, the weird turn pro, and I think that I became a professional reading, his book. That was a great Where the Buffalo Roam.
Oh yeah.
Bill Murray, what an actor. He's kind of a wacky person, but he played Hunter S. Thompson so well there, and him and his attack dog that would attack the Nixon doll. It was great. You
Yeah,
remember that? Nixon, and
that
the dog
that
would
is
grab him
that
by the crotch. What
that
a
is
movie,
yeah,
Dennis.
that is a movie that when somebody says greatest performances by Bill Murray,
That would be it. Yeah.
that's one that I always mention. And there's a lot of folks that will say, "What? I
Yeah,
don't remember that one." The other
that's a
one that I
good.
loved was he did a movie where he was a tourist in London and got caught up in a spy ring and just
Oh, I think
his
he's had some offbeat things.
oh just very bizarre, but those are two of my favorites. And of course, his role in Caddyshack goes
Oh yeah,
down
yeah.
in history. But
Carl,
but
Carl.
but his ability to not just show up and play himself in every movie. He's always
Kind of like
morphing
John
in.
Wayne. John Wayne was
Yeah.
John Wayne. After Stagecoach and some of his early
Yes.
films, he kind of got into this rhythm. And look, he made money. Why not do it? I mean, that's the thing is, they say typecasting is bad, but it can be good for your bankroll.
Yes, it can. Just ask Tom Cruise. But enough of
Exactly.
this movie talk. We're here to talk
Fantasy
fantasy
football.
football and
You got some
Professor,
gripes, Dennis?
I
What
I
you got
have
here
a
today?
I have a medium rare gripe.
Okay,
Okay.
medium rare. Okay.
Medium rare gripe.
Okay.
So and I did a little research. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at doing searches on Twitter, but I found some people complaining about the same things last year as they were doing this year. And
Yeah.
I think we overreact to every injury that happens. And I can't. Somebody asked the other day, says, "Are there more injuries happening this year than ever before?" And people are, "Oh yeah, yes, definitely. Oh, look at this. All these guys are out, and look at these guys are out." And my answer was, "I'm not sure because I haven't done the research. It feels like there's more injuries this year, maybe to more top line players. I don't know." But the other overreaction is tight end position's dead. We should eliminate the tight end position from fantasy football. So I looked at the data, Professor.
Yeah.
It's not really down that much from last year. And last year, obviously, the tight end position was still alive and well in the eyes of everybody because tight ends were drafted fairly close to last year. I mean, Kelsey was the only one who was not going. There wasn't a tight end going in the first round this year because Kelsey wasn't being taken until the second. But if you look at where the top three tight ends went this year versus last year versus a couple years ago, you can't go all the way back to like 1998. But if you look at just the last 3 years, people are taking tight ends, the elite tight ends, at about the same rate as they were the previous year. And the previous year was down in fantasy scoring, but all of fantasy football scoring was down last year versus the 6 year average. We saw that in the data. We did the study
Yep.
on that. Passing yards this year are down. They're noticeably down when you look at the strength of defenses versus last year. Last year, if you were giving up 200 yards or more, you were still, you could be like the top 10, top 12 defense in passing yards. Now, if you're giving up 200 yards, you're middle of the pack. You're back of the pack. 233 is what New Orleans Saints are giving up a game on average the first 4 games, and they're 25th in the league at just 233. You had to be in the 260s in past years. So scoring is down because passing yards are down. Passing yards are down because defenses are playing smarter against those long passes. But the tight end position hasn't really changed on the upper end of scoring. Now, that's not saying that the elite tight ends haven't been a bust because they have. It just means that the scoring at tight end has not changed. So maybe we're just wrong on who we thought the best tight ends were going into the 2024 season.
Is this in reference to your article that's up on the Science of Fantasy Football?
It was generated by that gripe,
Yeah,
yes. And
so folks, y'all can go check that article out. There's a chart there. You can look at the last 4 years. Dennis charted it for us. I thought it was pretty good. I calculated the metrics minus the median. Just I like to look at things like that,
Yeah.
and so I generated a little bit different chart, but you got both charts to look at, and I will say this, Dennis, and this is a broader thing, and maybe we're transitioning out of that because I've been thinking about this, and you inspired me with our off before the show talking about skepticism and science and how you perceive it's changing.
Yeah.
Being in the middle, I've seen it as well. Uh, it's a well, we had different teachers than the teachers that are teaching now. I know from the 70s and the high school and then college, it's different now. It doesn't One could argue, is that bad? Is that good? Remember the old folks, it's bad, right? Anything that didn't happen to you don't understand. We had it, and every generation feels that way. So
Yes.
just be aware that in the old days when the mail sure is slow, takes 2 weeks. Pony Express, that kind of, remember, it's all relative. You complain now about whatever. There's nothing. Don't you love the kids? Some of my friends' grandkids, and there's nothing on TV, and I just laugh with the cable and the satellite. He. You know, I remember getting up at 6:30 every Saturday to watch every cartoon I could possibly watch as a kid. Get that, Captain Crunch cereal, Fruit Loops, or whatever. I don't mean Quisp or Quake. I don't know if you remember those cereals, Dennis, but anything weird,
Oh
some weird
yeah.
cereal, and watch 6:30 up. Man, I was watching everything I could watch until American Bandstand, and then I didn't care about that newfangled stuff. I was going to go out and play then at that point. But anyway, my mom she liked American Bandstand, and so she'd watch all the stuff in the 70s. And but times are different, and I think in fantasy football, there are segments that, you have your early draft, your late draft, right in August, early drafts right after the draft in May, June. And each segment is going to require different things. And now we are starting the bye weeks, and they advertise it on the Serious Fantasy radio that I listen to. I do listen to that, not to necessarily, listen to their opinions. And I'm glad everybody's on there. I like them all. It's great, wonderful. But just the new news. And so by weeks, you've got to pay even more attention, and you might have to be a little aggressive on your waivers. Our waivers run tonight. I love Wednesday waivers because that late breaking news, you can get an advantage that people last night didn't have on those earlier waivers. I like it. Of course, we will get another bite Sunday morning. We have 2 waiver periods using Fab Budget. And so I'm going to be paying attention all the way up till Sunday morning, Dennis. I'm putting waivers in early, got my coffee, putting those last minute waivers in. And one of the last things I do is look at the kickers. So I don't really pay attention to kickers till like Sunday morning. And then I just make sure everybody's healthy and whatnot. But right now, Dennis, it's the bye weeks, waivers, and there's a lot of stuff going down today. I mentioned it. Brandon Cooks, Dallas, has an infection in the knee. Apparently had some procedure. I don't know if they were draining some fluid off the knee, or I don't know. Maybe there was a low grade infection and that caused the fluid. Because when you're an athlete, sometimes if you stress and strain tendons, ligaments, muscles, you can get some fluid buildup because you're getting damage. Anytime there's damage, either from bacteria, viruses or athletics, you breaking muscles and you're straining that the body response. It's like fever, right? You get illness, that you get fever, you feel bad. That is your body's reaction. That's a natural way to fight it. And I just wonder, was he already had maybe something brewing or something low level, and then the procedure maybe jump started it. But anyway, Dennis, I'm pretty skeptical about him coming back, quickly. So given his performance, I'm actually can't move on in best ball, but I'm moving on in fishing. And of course, Devontae Adams, and I'm sure I want to hear your take on that. But where's he wants to go to the Saints. Boy, if you got Olave or Shakir, that Rashid, that's not good. And then to the Jets, Garrett Wilson. We don't want him here. It's like, no, think about it. Fantasy football, they don't want him anywhere but where he's at. But if he leaves, does that mean Trey, the Tucker kid, is the one to get? So I'm actually upping my fab money for him a little bit. Kansas City, is it Hilaire? Is it Hunt? Is Steele really in the doghouse? Is there somebody else we hadn't even thought of yet, Dennis? You never know. And the wide receivers, Rice is he out for the whole season, or maybe not? Or so is Juju Smith? Is he back? Worthy? Who's who and who's what? And there's a lot of moving pieces. And given the bye weeks, it's going to get crazy in these bye weeks here, Dennis. And I think with the tight ends being down, that's putting added pressure on folks. And the more decisions you have to make, the higher the chances your brain will get tired. I've got 41 leagues to oversee, Dennis. I have to worry. I have to stop and let it rest. And there is evidence that decision making when you're hungry, the hangry concept is real.
Oh, yeah.
Your brain needs glucose, and they have tracked like decisions of judges before and after. Let's just say if you're a criminal, you want the judge to have a nice fat meal and then look at your case. You don't want them hangry at you at 11 o'clock. You want to see them at 1:30 after they've had that big pizza meal, and they're going to be more lenient in the afternoon. But so there's some uh, evidence of when you're making your waiver wires. Are you hangry? You're still pissed. In other words, Tuesday waiver wires, people are still mad about Monday. And I just wonder,
Oh, yeah.
versus I've got all day Tuesday to deal. Okay, what I saw Monday, and things are just happening. I like the rhythm of a Wednesday waiver. So, Dennis, I kind of griped about a lot of things here. It wasn't one big thing. I was like a bee, and I went flower to flower, and I just dusted lots of pollen off. So, where do you want to start on those things I brought up?
Oh, I know your feeling on the waivers because I've got about 35 teams on Sleeper that all all have their waivers at different times,
That's
but I
crazy.
but I can't keep track of that. So what I do is after Monday Night Football, I go through my rosters and I start thinking ahead for the next week. And most of these are deep roster dynasty teams, so there's not a lot on the waiver wire. Usually when you're grabbing somebody, it's a very speculative grab for future weeks. It's, very rare that I have a week like last week where I picked up Jeremy McNichols with Eckler out, and I played him in a couple of very deep leagues. I mean, I didn't play him in, you know, typical redraft leagues. I picked up Paris Campbell in one league and played him. in a very, very deep league. So I, I feel almost sorry for my opponents because they're probably looking at that going, how the hell did he figure this out? I'm like, I'm guessing, boys. I have no idea. It. I've told you many times, Professor, when it comes to some of my speculative grabs in, especially a deep roster dynasty, I don't have any insight on this. I just know if that guy is on the roster and he is the next man up, and there's a situation where now he is going to be in that lineup, he's worth an ad on your team. I don't put a lot of money into the fab to get him. I put $1 or $2 or three is my favorite bid because most people, if they do a bid, seems to be one or two. So if I go three, I'm not costing myself a lot of fab money, but I'm out dueling the one and twos and the zero fab people, because a lot of those leagues you don't even have to spend $1. You can spend zero. Unlike FPPC, I love FPPC because they make you spend at least $1. So you cannot use up all your fab during the season. You have to be smart in how you manage it. But so many changes going on this week. It's absolutely crazy to try to figure out who's going to be where. You mentioned Brandon Cooks. Now that was a guy that I was not in on, as everybody likes to say, I'm in or out on a particular player. I was not drafting a lot of Brandon Cooks this year. I was drafting more Jalen Tolbert, taking a shot on the new guy in town. Again, my philosophy, if I see an aging vet whose MVP score has been declining, I stay away from him. Occasionally it beats me, and I'm okay with that. But speculating on the next upcoming player is what I'll tend to do more of. And I think Jalen Tolbert's got an opportunity now and may never give that opportunity back. He's been better than Cooks while Cooks has been out there. And now I think he's got that chance. In Vegas, first of all, I didn't like a lot of, I don't have much in the way of Vegas in single season leagues. I've added a few shares of Alexander Madison when it became clear that he's probably going to get more volume on any given week than Zamir White, although Zamir White got the volume last week and didn't do anything with it. But as far as wide receiver, there's nothing else there that gets you excited. DJ Turner would be one of the next men up. He's an undrafted free agent. Tyreek McAllister, no draft capital to him, and he's been fighting some injuries. The only games in town without Devontae Adams there are Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker. Both of them go from being marginal plays to being worthwhile of a play in fantasy football. The Chiefs are an interesting bunch. I thought that they might try to trade. I thought they might try to acquire a guy like Amari Cooper. The Browns changed his contract in the offseason when there was no reason to renegotiate. It wasn't like they had to fit him under the cap. And they made his contract for this year very trade friendly. His hit is less than the 53rd player hit on the Chiefs right now. So he's free to any team if they wanted to trade for him. And I thought they did that in case they were not a contender for whatever reason, that they could deal him. So I thought the Chiefs might go after him. But then when the Rashee Rice news sounds like he might not have torn both ligaments, as was originally feared was both, then it was the ACL, and now it's maybe a bone bruise and something. Who knows what's going on with his leg? I guess when there's a lot of swelling, you can't really get accurate diagnosis anyway. So maybe we find out more in the next few days. Who is the guy to own there? I've got three choices if they don't make a trade. Maybe Juju, takes a bump. Xavier Worthy is the guy. He's now the prime wide receiver, but it's who is number two on that team. Could be Juju, or it could be Justin Watson. Justin Watson is kind of like that Julian Edelman type player that you always wonder, how did this guy make the roster? And then when he makes the roster, you're like, how did this guy keep getting opportunities? He's just a good football player. That doesn't mean he's a great fantasy football player. He's just a good football player, but he might have some enhanced value in the weeks that Rice is out. But the guy that I think is going to take the biggest bump isn't somebody that anybody is talking about. I haven't seen anybody on fantasy football Twitter talking about this. I think Noah Gray becomes a play on a weekly basis. If you need during bye weeks, that guy that can get you between 5 and 10 points. It's not going to be a huge point getter for you unless he finds the end zone, but he could be an 8-9 point guy when there's nothing else out there. Plus, he's an emergency fill-in during the bye weeks for your tight end. So if Noah Gray is available in your league, I'd pick him up. He's worth a small amount in fab. I wouldn't bid a lot on him, just like I wouldn't bid a lot for Juju or for Justin Watson, but I acquired all three in my FPPC. I put in bids for him on FPPC this week on my 5 teams. I only have 5 redraft teams on FPPC to manage. In the playoffs, 3 out of 5, though, Professor. I'm pretty happy with that.
That's
but
very good. Very good. Excellent.
Despite, facing my share of the injuries like everybody else, I have one team that's second in the league right now. I lost CMC and Pacheco already. So if I get those guys back for the fantasy football playoffs, I might actually have something going on. But no, that's the way I look at each one of these team situations, professors. You got to look at the roster, look at the players. If there's a guy on that roster who has been already getting some snaps, that's the guy that I kind of look at. With the Rams, Whittington, the Rook, I liked him in the preseason. I was a little surprised that he didn't come on and do something when I thought maybe he could take over for Demarcus Robinson. But Demarcus Robinson's just a good, real football player. The teams love to have those working class wide receivers who can block in their lineups. Doesn't make mistakes. A lot more of an option to count on than a rookie. But
I
now,
will say, I'm looking at the snaps from my snaps report. He went from 22 week 3, 59.
yes,
Led it last week. He over Robinson, over Tutu.
yeah,
So,
and I think
he is of interest. He's in one of my he's one of my plays to look at in my dollar venue when I show up at that. And I haven't done a lot of serious bids, but he's in that string. But he's in the top end of the dollar place right now. He had scored as much. Tutu has scored more. I'm looking at my scoring. He's Tutu every 3 snaps has been averaging a PPR point. Whittington is every 7 snaps. So twice, 1/2 of Tutu's value. But, DeMarco Robinson is about 8 snaps to get a point. So he's been underperforming. I think that opens the door, believe it or not, for Tutu and Whittington. And I've got Tutu out there as just an interest as long as Cup and Puka are out. You've got to pay attention. But if anybody wants to check that out, you should check out the snaps report. I've got that. I've got average player snaps, the scoring, the weekly snaps. I've got it all there for you. And I've got Friday, I'm going to have the uh, scoring level PPR per snap by weeks. I'll have that. And we can look at what players are very consistent. And Tutu is 2 weeks out of four. He's been in the top ranks. Cooper Kupp both weeks that he's played, so 100% he's been, and Puka 100% in the one. So right now, Whittington and DeMarcus have not made that jump to the elite status. I call the elite the top 25% in the league PPR per snap, and I guess I should be sharing this since I'm recording it, Dennis. But I could
Yeah.
have showing them. But you can look, Dennis. Here is the scoring for the Rams, and we'll talk. Let's save this for Friday. But I just, since you brought that up, I did want to talk about. So the rookie right now is not quite there, but it's pretty point. Every 5 snaps they're getting a point is starting to get my interest. And you're saying, how do you gauge that? Well, if you do your own, it's like I do this by hand. I kind of start knowing what's of the kind of that next level I need to start paying attention to. And no offense to any folks out there that make their own metrics, but I like my metrics because it makes me do this, and I have hands on. I've done it. I know where this comes from. I know what it's saying. And I mean, my advice to people that are listening right now, Dennis, is do your own stuff. Maybe pick PPR per snap metric this, and you start doing and building your database, right? And then you can pay attention to how Dennis and I critically look at data. And then that's that next step. That's the frosting on the cake, but you got to build the cake first, Dennis. And so that's what, if nothing else, somebody says, Dennis, John, I don't need you anymore. You've helped me and I'm going to do my own thing. That'd be great, folks. I mean, we're not charging anything. I mean, some people, I lost a customer. I don't want to get them too smart. I don't care. I'm not here to take your money. And Dennis is not. We're trying to push the scientific method and critical thinking. And I think our work will be done when everybody does that. Fantasy receipts won't be needed anymore. We will put them out of business, Dennis, if everybody started listening to us. I know it'll never happen. That's fine. But I can dream. In fantasy receipts, I think they're going extra scrutinizing, but I follow fantasy receipts. You're gonna have to shoot fast and quick. If you ever played the video game Duck Hunt, you ever played, and the prize duck, would just show up for a second and flop back down. That's me, Dennis. I flip up out of the weeds and I'm back down again. Where'd he go? Who was that? That was the professor. Flipped out of the weeds and he's back again. So
but
I do anyway, Dennis. That was I went on the, as you know, I kind of got on my professorial uh soapbox. I'm back now. You can take over.
no, and here's the thing. And I love fantasy receipts. Okay, I'll call them out when I think they go too far with a
They got a
take.
little bit last year. I
They
remember
get a
one
little
time.
they get a little salty. I'll remind them that there's plenty of people to pick on
Yeah.
that are saying really dumb things. Don't get too nitpicky. That shouldn't be the purpose of fantasy receipts. But all week, Professor,
Yeah.
people were loading up with tweets that will probably come back to haunt them. on fantasy receipts,
Yeah.
maybe as early as this weekend. This idea that Mark Andrews can be dropped
Okay.
in
So
all
I need,
formats of
yeah.
fantasy football. If
Yeah.
you're dropping Mark Andrews
Yeah.
in
Well,
in fantasy football,
Dennis, I can turn to that data. Let's
and
look at Mark Andrews.
so here's the problem with Mark Andrews.
He hadn't scored, but nobody scored
Nobody scored, but he's not
yeah,
on the field enough to score.
yeah. And his snaps 26. Look, likely 31, 26, and Charlie Kohler 19. He's probably the blocking tight end. But look at the last 2 weeks, 21 and 26. Dennis, you can't make a living on that. We need in
No,
the 40s and 50s.
you need for a tight end. I want 45, 50 as my minimum every week. So if Mark Andrews was on the field for
Yeah.
50 snaps and putting up a goose egg
Then we got a problem.
week after week after week after week, he does that 4 weeks straight, plays 50 snaps, puts up a goose egg. I'm dropping his ass. Okay. But at this level of performance where he's not getting on the field because he's coming back from an injury, folks.
You think he over pushed it week one?
I don't know if he over pushed it or whether it was the necessity of the game that had him out there that many weeks or that many snaps. I think it might
59 is a lot for a tight end.
it's a lot, and I think it has affected him. And then I think they've had the luxury here of saying, you know
Well,
what?
they've got likely, so that helps them so they can split time.
They could split time between the two equally. And if you add them up, they're both in the upper 50s if you add them up. So there were a single tight end right now. And Kohler gives them that good blocking tight end that they can put out there. They've got the fullback type guy that can also line up at the tight end spot. So if the people that are saying drop Mark Andrews, they are going to be burned by that advice if he's on the field for 50 snaps. If he never gets to 50 snaps this year because he's not 100% for whatever reason, hey, we don't get all the information. Look what happened with CMC this year. Yeah. Nobody in the or in the NFL reporting business, not a single person in the NFL reporting business had any inkling that anything was wrong with Christian McCaffrey. That's an injury that's been with him since the offseason. So the NFL reporting isn't always accurate. I go by snaps. If a guy's not on the field, his normal number of snaps, I worry. But if he's not on the field, I don't worry when he puts up a 0. I just go find another tight end to play until he's full time. But I don't throw him off the roster yet. And this whole idea that, oh, I can play Patrick, I can bench Patrick Mahomes and put Justin Fields or put Trevor Lawrence or put somebody else out there for Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes has been just a few points below median each and every game. That's not going to kill you. Josh Allen throwing up a under 10-point game this past week, that kills you. That's going to nail your fantasy football team's hopes. That's it. In a typical redraft league where you start one quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 2 flex, if your quarterback puts up 7 points,
Dennis,
you're dead.
I'm seeing NFL rumor. I'm so excited. From NFL, it says TJ Hawkinson expected to play within the next 2 weeks. Oh my goodness. Oh, Dennis, I am so waiting. My little feelers are clicking together.
Oh,
I was just scanning. No offense, Dennis. I do love your emotations. I don't, that's probably not a real word, but I appreciate that. And folks, during the expo, Dennis was a joy to meet in person and hear him. He doesn't change. If you heard him versus you hung around with him, he's going to go off on the tangents. But guess what? So do I. And so we just have to balance each other. And that's probably why this works, Dennis, is I can go on my soapbox with you. We both can drag it around and jump up on it. But anyway, I'm very excited about TJ
Oh,
Hawkinson, your
great
article
news.
about the tight ends. I'm probably over excited, but folks, I have so many shares of Hawkinson. I'm trying to think on my team. Let's see. I forgot. I'll have to figure it out, but I got a bunch, Dennis, that I drafted in best ball. He was my number two tight end in best ball. I would grab Ingram, Njoku, and you're saying, well, you got burned on that. Well, and then Hawkinson. Guess who my third was? Ertz. For
Yes.
most of it, I grabbed Ertz. So guess what, folks? I saved my butt. And now the Joku may be getting back, and I'm just sitting in the weeds with TJ. And now Ertz is the thing. The Joku come back, Ingram can come back, and I'll have Hawkinson. Oh my goodness. I think some of my best ball teams will resurrect from the dead. About time Halloween hits, Dennis, those zombie teams are coming back to life and give me a shot at getting in the best ball playoffs here. Uh, I'm hoping. But anyway, I just saw that,
So,
so I had to
so,
break in. I'm very excited about that.
so preseason, when we were discussing Hawkinson,
Yep.
I said week 7 was my guess.
Yeah, doesn't he have a bye week 6? Is that
6,
right?
I think, is a bye week.
Yeah.
So I was guessing week 7
Yep.
was when we would see him by week 6.
And I remember you saying with Ertz, you said, if Sanat eclipses Ertz, I think he'll last for the first 6 weeks. And
Yep.
then, so that was our fear. And I think a lot of people, you could get them all about the same time. Maybe even Snot was going earlier. And I just went with Ertz and figured, yep, I'll take the first 6 weeks of him. And I remember you telling me that, and that made me feel better about my Ertz selection as my third pick.
Yeah, I had a lot of Ertz as well. I have a bunch of leagues, including the Football Guys Bowl. Again, this is
Ooh,
a tourney style league. So you got to win out of your division and then you go on.
yep.
Well, I I was very conservative in that league. I got the tight end that I wanted in the 9th round, Dallas Goddard. Hawkinson was available end of the 11th,
Nice.
and I grabbed him as quick as can be. Um, and my feeling was this is a tight end premium league. You got to start a cup, you got to 2 flex positions. So my worst case was end of the year. I'm playing Goddard and Hawkinson. If Goddard does not do anything past week 6, I've got Hawkinson to take over. I'm feeling good about that team. I do have a lot of teams where I had Ertz and Hawkinson also in redraft. I have that Football Guys Bowl. I rolled the dice, Professor. I have Nick Chubb to go
Nice.
with Hawkinson, and Chubb was the
I
first.
think he was practicing this week.
He was in practice, so they've got to bring him back in 3 weeks now.
Nice.
He's got to go to the active roster in 3 weeks. And Jerome Ford hasn't been doing so well. In that Football Guys league, I drafted Chubb in the end of the 7th round, and came back with Jerome Ford in the
To cover
10th
your base, to
to
play
to
them both.
play them both. And, that was my strategy, is to make sure I've got, something to play in the meantime, but I had my investments. And I managed those tournament leagues because I have Chubb in Scott Fishbowl as well. I managed those tournament leagues a little bit different, in which I said, I know I should be able to survive and make it to the playoffs. I want guys like Hawkinson and Chubb jumping in end of the season. So I've got a better roster at the end of the year. And with my better than zero strategy, it kind of lends itself to doing better during bye weeks and at the end of the season, because you have more running backs than everybody else. You started out with guys. I laugh every week, Professor, when I see who the hot fab guys are at running back, and they're already on my roster.
Yeah.
Because I played the next man up game, and I've got them already parked, whether it's deep dynasty, and I've got guys like Trey Sermon parked, waiting for something to happen to Taylor, who now has a high ankle sprain and will miss probably at least 1 week. So that's the way you've got to play fantasy football. Maybe it's just the way my brain is wired, of realizing that I don't know what I don't know. I was asked on a radio show this past week, was this hurricane and all the flooding in the Carolinas and Tennessee, was that a sign of climate change? Everybody else's answer was, oh yeah, definitely, or no, climate change is a hoax. My answer was, maybe. We don't know what we don't know. We do know from past history that in 1916, and I've constantly said on the air when I'm asked about climatology, my background not only in meteorology but statistical climatology, I have said on many interviews when I'm asked about the weather, we are in a pattern with solar flare activity and just our regular weather patterns, similar to what they had in the first half of the 20th century. So from 1900 to about mid 50s. And you look at these weather records, the last time Western Carolina had this bad of a flooding was in 1916. These things are not just happening randomly. You're in patterns that help things on. But yes, man has changed the atmosphere in some ways and yes, the atmosphere will hold more moisture when it's warmer, but how much of that is due to man and us screwing up our atmosphere? How much are due to natural cycles? Nobody knows. I have the same mentality when it comes to fantasy football. I don't know what I don't know. And so,
and damn it, I'll never know it.
No, next man up is the way to handle that. In fantasy football, the next man up theory is the way to handle that. In horse racing, it's pace handicapping. Can I decipher this race, of how this race is going to happen? I got 5 really good horses. Is the pace setting up for somebody? That's the way you play each game, is you have to adjust for what is going on. And part of that preparation, Professor, is having better data than everybody else. And I have become such a big believer in your rankings because I've seen them. I've seen them work.
Well, Dennis, look, I appreciate it. Everything that I try to do and put out on our site, besides the scientific method, touting that and, critical thinking, every time I have a figure, and if you've got the video, you see my week 5 scaled rankings. We're about to talk Thursday night game. It's a beginning. It's a place to start.
Yes.
What I don't like is not having something to start as my foundation. And that's what I see is a weakness in the experts is it's like they have an opinion and then they start pulling stuff in. I don't. This is my view of week 5 to begin with. This is not what I expect. Monday night, boy, I was exactly right on everything. No, this is just inspiring my thinking. In other words, why is, for instance, I got Seattle number 1 this week, New England the last place. What's going on? Look at the difference. Big difference. I mean, if you think about it, it's almost it's plus 25 minus 20. That's a big gap in team performance this week. So if I'm looking at lineups, if I'm looking at waivers, if I'm looking at daily fantasy, player props, anything like this, and you're just blindly picking, well, Hunter Henry's pretty good. Just be aware this week my rankings would caution you to get better odds at least. If you're hell bent on Hunter Henry in props or something, get some good odds for him, right? I mean, I've been to the track, 100-to-1 shots can win, but you get paid for those extreme situations. So it's a beginning, Dennis, and that's why I do appreciate your comments, but just
You want
realize.
to know
And
how I use it,
how
Professor?
do you use it? It's a
So I
good
use this.
tiebreaker, maybe.
This is a big time for me. So and I use it in a very smart way, or what I think is a very smart way. So if I look at this chart and I
Yep.
see Seattle at the top
Yep.
and I see Green Bay at number 7, okay?
Yep.
Treat them all pretty similar. I treat the top group
Yep.
as the in other words, yes, there's a pretty significant difference between Seattle and Green Bay in this ranking.
But I'm
But
not defining the standard deviation from the
no,
median, Dennis.
no,
I'm just kind of throwing the numbers out because it's kind of like there's 3 buckets each week, kind of the good ones,
yes,
the average ones, and the ones I'm worried about. So if you treat it like that, that's probably a safe way versus no, Dennis, Seattle is X and Green Bay is Y, and I always bet X or Y. Folks, you're going to lose if you're a slave to the numbers like that. It just
yes,
won't work.
no. But if you use the numbers in a smart way,
Yes.
you will be better off because Ramondre Stevenson was a guy that I picked a lot of this
Oh,
year.
yeah. Yeah.
Love the player,
Sad
but
about those fumbles, and they're even squawking about it on
yep,
Twitter today, Dennis,
he's
that
he's
Gibson should get the start. There's
yep,
speculations.
he's fumbling. He's in an offense though that is a minus 17.7.
Yeah, it's not good.
So there are more problems than just fumbling the ball. There are more problems than just being
Let's
Ramondre
just say it
Stevenson.
catches a lot of attentions, and if a coach wants to keep his job for the next week, I think you patch the biggest hole in the roof, Dennis, and try to muddle through with the leakier, smaller holes.
Yeah,
It,
but
it you need a new roof, shall we say?
yeah,
New England needs new stuff. I don't know what the new stuff is. Is it the offensive line? Is it the defense? I don't think it's Ramondre Stevenson per se. I'm not going to come down on he's the problem.
well, here's what I'm going to say is nobody's fearing Jacoby Brissett.
No.
And if you are not concerned about the quarterback, look what's happened with Miami.
Oh,
Miami, one of the most high flying offenses that we have ever seen put together here in the NFL. You remove the quarterback, who is the heart and soul of that
yep,
team,
yep.
and you don't have a pulse. You get to the point where you're talking about looking for another option than Tyreek Hill as a starter. You're not dropping him off your roster unless you're totally insane. You're not dropping Waddle unless you're totally insane. But you're thinking about, do I have a better solution that can get me more than 7 or 8 points? Because when Tyreek Hill, when his ceiling becomes 12 points and he can't get there, you know your team has had problems. And there they are in the red on the professor's scaled ranks. I'm telling you, folks, and here's the thing. Professor and I are smart enough but comfortable enough with each other that if I put out a statistical thing, or the professor puts out a statistical thing, and the other person does not believe that that is good, first we'll do a study about it, and then we'll tell the other person, hey, look, that's the professor took my MVP index and told me where my strengths and weaknesses are. What I'm telling you, folks, is this scaled ranks that the professor put out, the efficiency data that the professor has created. These are things that the professor has created through research and understanding how the game of football, and therefore the game of fantasy football, works. This data is better than a lot of this other stuff that you will see out there, but it's a tool to be used wisely. You don't, unless you're a complete idiot, you don't use a hammer to drive a screw. Okay. You use a screwdriver for a reason. This data, though, can be used very wisely. For, in other words, another example, Seattle, top of the rankings this week. If I've got a Seattle player in the skill positions, I'm looking for an excuse not to start them, versus New England or Indianapolis, the Rams, Giants. The Giants, if I have Malik Neighbors and he's healthy enough to play, he's in the starting lineup. But I'm not going to look for other parts and pieces of the Giants unless I'm really desperate. I've been very desperate and have had to start Wan'Dale Robinson. He's paid off for me. But I go in understanding that his ceiling is about 15 points and his floor is about 4. And the reason I can say that with confidence, because sometimes, folks, I'll tell you, he's got great upside, but I'm not sure where the floor is. Or I'll say, I know where his floor is, but I don't know where his ceiling is. With Wan'Dale Robinson, 4 to 15. That's what he's going to get you any given week. I can say that with assurance because of this data. If a team is in the red, that variance from best game to worst game, and again, when I say worst game is 0, best game is 45, 50 points. That's, I'm saying, logical range of outcomes, which is narrower. But if you're in the red, that floor drops. That floor drops way off. If you are in the green, that floor is pretty solid. DK Metcalf is about almost a 9-10 point floor play right now against most defenses. He has to have a lot of things go wrong for him not to be worthy of being in your lineup. And it's all because of this data that I know that for a fact. But Professor, go ahead and explain this for this week.
Okay, so Atlanta, Tampa Bay. Atlanta is 11. Tampa Bay is pretty much median for this week, which is interesting. Dennis, I just calculated this. I didn't even pay attention until just this moment. So my first question, why is Atlanta, higher than Tampa Bay? I mean, last week you would almost flip the script, so that makes me wonder a little bit. So then I go to my uncertainty um, measurement when I group players into three buckets: high, average, and low. And Atlanta is a four, very uh, higher uncertainty, and Tampa Bay is very low uncertainty. So we have a really interesting dynamic. And I don't know the relationship, Dennis, because Dennis, I need some freaking interns, but I would love to understand the relationship where Atlanta here, but the uncertainty level is higher. So you got that data, but then you got this. So I think, folks, if you, it's a system. A system requires multiple inputs and higher orders of interactions that we may not even understand or see. I can guarantee you, I don't understand everything about the fantasy this week. There's just a lot of moving pieces. So I'm kind of like, okay, maybe this is a little too broad if I'm just comparing one to the other. And then I have my efficiency metrics that looks at scoring and yards kind of over time, the faster teams scoring quicker. And notice Tampa Bay is here. See, I was thinking scoring, that's very intriguing. Atlanta is a little closer and below. So when I go through all this data, Dennis, my feeling is that the range of outcomes is probably broader than I think, and but I don't think that. And then I look to, I guess, our metric here. Vegas spread 1 point. Vegas thinks it's on top, 23-20. 44 is kind of but Vegas is even quite of unsure. They're calling Atlanta the favorite, but they've got to be aware that other aspects, and you're measuring these teams, it's not as clear cut as the one. So notice I've gone through three different layers of information. And one said, well, why didn't you start with Vegas? We could. I there's no reason why I started with the ranks other than just I did. But I like to think through. So when I'm Sunday morning, I've had this data in my head long enough that a lot of it is just fingertip knowledge, and I can just roll through and flip the lineups and pretty much make pretty good decisions. Not 100%, but pretty good. So this week, Vegas thinks, in my opinion, with a spread of one, it could go either way. It's a coin flip. My defense against position, I call DAPS. Atlanta has a quarterback advantage and a defense advantage a little bit, but the rest of them a little below average. To me, my metrics, if I'm betting Vegas, I'm thinking that's kind of in the average bucket. So nothing dramatic one way or the other. It's not like, wow, they have an easy or a tough. Tampa Bay, on the other hand, their running game is predicted to be rough on them, but their wide receivers and kicker is supposed to be pretty good. So I love Evans. I'm loving Godwin this week. Even if Tampa Bay's not the favorite, I'm liking that. I hate the Thursday night game and I hate the London games. I was
Oh.
going to bitch about that come Saturday, but anyway, tea and crumpets my ass. Uh, I hate the
It's like
London. Don't get me going, Dennis, on
I
these
have to get up
foreign
I have to get up early to set 30 to take 37
tea
lineups
and
worth of
crumpet.
out
Dennis,
guys
you
out.
have, you got to have your tea and crumpets. Screw that. Didn't we
Oh,
didn't we beat those guys and got our independence from those Englishmen? Come on, man. Anyway,
we should have independence
we
from
should have independence
setting
playing
8 o'clock
our
in the morning
yeah,
lineups.
that's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Let them suffer on the time. Make it easy on us. Anyway,
Yes.
so Atlanta, then my efficiency is, like I said, a little worse, but that's there's nothing dramatic there. 60 versus 70, really, Dennis. Uh, home away splits. Atlanta is away. They like to rush more and pass a little bit less, but nothing real dramatic. So I expect Bijan, even though he's got a tough this tendency, says rush this week. Tampa Bay being, I'm sorry, Atlanta at home, they're going to rush less, so they'll pass about average. So Bijan may not have. I thought Atlanta was the away. They're the home team. Tampa Bay away, they are going to rush more, pass less. So, but the DAPs say they should pass more. So their tendency in away games is exactly opposite of what they should do by the DAPs, Dennis. So I don't have enough interns. I would love to have understanding folks. Anybody want to volunteer? I've got this data here. I could put you to work. You may not like it, but it would be good for your soul to help me figure this out. But anyway, Dennis, I'm back and I'm thinking I'm not going to take any chances on some extra, like for instance, I'm not sure I'm paying Mooney or Ray McLeod, but I
No.
think you're playing, and I'm probably not. I'm off Pitts because in my
Ugh.
usage, snap
Yeah.
usage, I could pull that data up. And Dennis, Atlanta is very skewed to the wide receiver. Number one in the league in snap usage, wide receivers, 48% usage. That's that is above. I mean, they're in their own. They're in the beyond the whisker compared to everybody else in the league. They're skewing to the passing, which is fine if it works. Then you collect points. But I was off on Pitts because last year's tight end usage was sad, and it hasn't gotten any better this week. So I'm curious as Tampa Bay goes against their tendency, and if they do, I think easily they could upset Atlanta, Dennis, and Mayfield could go on another tear. This is not a settled game by any means here. And if you're interested, you can see my actual uncertainty levels and rankings 0 to 100. And I'll have this up tomorrow when I post our podcast.
So a couple of things here. So I love the way you explained each layer of the data. And again, I go back to my process for handicapping horse races. A lot of people, when they handicap horse races, start with the speed figures, right? If a
Yes.
horse is fast, that's what I don't do that. I start my handicapping by analyzing the class of each horse. So when I'm analyzing a fantasy football situation or the outcome of a football game, I'm using
Right.
that first chart of yours
Okay.
as a class type of an analysis. Okay. In horse racing, I'm all for betting on a 10,000 claimer beating a 15,000 claimer if he's in better shape. But I won't bet a 10,000 claimer to beat a 40,000 claimer.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this case, Atlanta at about an 11.3, Tampa at a 0.8. I'm like, that's only one class difference.
Difference. Yes, it is.
I'm not worried about that as much as I would if it was green to red
Yes.
or it was middle of the pack to very red, that sort of thing. So in this case, Atlanta isn't in the greenest of the green, and Tampa Bay is right down the middle. So both pass on class, but I might not get as eager to go to some other positions depending on DAPS. So then I go to that second chart of yours. Okay. And that is like the speed figures to me, looking at the efficiency of an offense. It's a 1-for-1 for me. It's the speed. It's the speed aspect. I want teams that can score in a hurry, because the more scoring is done, the more fantasy points we get. So if you've got a very active scoring team, I like that. And then it gets down to what I'd call recent form. And then situational handicapping. And that's where the DAPs come into play for me. So I'm using this data in a similar strategy as I do very this, and not weighting one over the other, but looking at all of these relationships. And that's where I come into this chart, which is like my pace handicapping. How are they going to win the game? What are they going to have to do to win the game? Tampa Bay is going to have to pass. So Tampa Bay, I'm maybe, if I got a different option for Rashid White or Bucky Irving this week, I'm looking away from the running backs. Now, both running backs can catch the ball out of the backfield, so both have some use in the passing game. But I'm just drooling when I look at this chart. I'm excited about Baker Mayfield because I've got him in a few lineups starting. He's my backup to Jalen Hurts this year.
Yes, me too.
He was my backup because I saw this game and I'm like, it's an indoor game. It's Atlanta. I know that Atlanta can get burned by a good offense. So the wide receivers having an easy DAP excites me. The below average for the quarterback doesn't get me too excited. If that was tough,
yeah, that would be really interesting.
And the wide receiver DAP was below average,
that would be
then
concerning.
I'd start getting concerned. But when wide receivers are locked and loaded, and this is a team that primarily is going to utilize their two best options, which are Evans and Godwin, I'm all excited about that. So I'll take Tampa in this one. I think it'll be a close game.
Yep.
And because I think it's going to be a close game, I'm kind of leaning to the over here because I think both teams will be susceptible to giving up some big plays.
I hate Thursday games.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I know there's, at least we're not having tea and freaking crumpets or whatever. I don't even know what the hell that is. What's crumpets? To me, when I hear that, it sounds like some crumb that you pull out of your toaster. There's your damn crumpets. Shut up and eat it. That's what I'd tell if I had some English cousins. They come to my Thanksgiving, I'd throw some crumpets on their damn plate. Eat that.
Well, if you told
me going, Dennis.
If you told me you were serving biscuits, they'd be thinking they're getting a shortbread cookie. So
I'd show them. We call those cat head biscuits with some sawmill gravy.
Oh yeah,
yeah. That's what they serve down there in Tennessee, in Gatlinburg. Come on, Dennis, you know that.
That's the biggest problem between us and the British, though.
Yeah,
we're
they don't even know how to talk right.
Two people separated by a common language.
Yeah,
so that's just the way it is.
Biscuit, come on.
Although I'm from Chicago. So yeah. English is my second language.
Yeah.
Gibberish is our primary language there in Chicago.
That's right.
But no, I do like Tampa. I love Baker Mayfield in this spot. I love the wide receivers. Running backs, not so much. I don't have any Kyle Pitts on my redraft and best ball teams this year. I
Yep.
was not a believer. I don't have any Drake London on my redraft and best ball teams because where he was going in the draft, you had to see a 40% increase in his weekly value just to break even. I didn't like
Where
that.
was he going? He was going late first round,
He was
was he?
going late first, early second. He was
Well,
going
see, I
way too
was
early.
picking up Henry at that point, and maybe
Oh, yeah.
Kelsey, or maybe
I
like
got
AJ Brown, which I mean
I
you
got
can't
me
predict
some.
injuries,
Yep.
but I was doing the
Ooh.
AJ Brown Henry flip near that turn. So I was
I
jumping
yeah.
over Drake to get AJ Brown and Henry. That's what I was fishing for.
Yeah, I had a lot of Henry there. I hedged my bets and grabbed a little bit of Barkley early second.
Oh, I like.
Um,
Yes, if
if
Henry was gone, I was grabbing Barkley.
Yeah, but Derrick Henry was my guy too. I mean, we took him in the draft night out. Remember when we took him 11th in draft night out? We
There
got
were
a
some
couple.
chortles.
There was some chortles. I think we
Yeah,
got the last laugh on that one, especially
yeah,
last week.
yeah.
But
We
you
need to
know,
whip their ass good this year and then come back and smack them again next year.
but that's the key, folks. Is don't be afraid. This is another thing that Professor and I learned at the horse race track. At the horse race track, the consensus is called the favorite. Okay. More people are betting money. The odds are lower. That's the favorite. That's what the consensus is telling you. You know how often, and this shocks people who are not horse players, Professor, when I tell them at the horse race track, even the half mile bull rings for harness racing, even on those tracks, the favorite, the consensus is wrong 2 out of every 3 races. Think about that for a minute. And it's the same in fantasy football. The consensus is often wrong. I don't know what the percentages are because I've never done a study on that. I just know that when I'm drafting a guy ahead of his ADP, I'm right more often than I'm wrong. So and when I'm laying off a guy at his ADP, I'm right more often than I'm wrong. That's all you have to be in fantasy football. You just have to beat the consensus. You don't have to be perfect.
I like it. I think that's great. Sounds like we'll have a at least an average Thursday. I'm still suspicious, Dennis. I'm going to play Godwin and Evans, and I don't have a lot of Atlanta, so I don't really have to worry about that.
Yeah. And if I were to say where I expect these total points to be,
Yeah.
they'll be within 5 points of this over under. So I probably wouldn't bet it, but over is the way I think. I think it'll be just barely over. Um, I like the Bucks, so give me the point. It's up to 1.5 now, and I'll
Well, I
take
just
that.
checked. It was a point and a half. I went to my site. It had it a point, so maybe it bounced back. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's probably bouncing pretty close, or different sites can be a half point different as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So it's going to be close. So head on over to scienceoffantasyfootball.com. Check out the professor's data, folks. I
Snap data's up. Yep.
cannot stress this enough. The snap data tells you who's getting on the field and how efficient they're doing what they're doing. And all of the professor's secret sauce is going to give you an advantage in fantasy football each and every week. Check out my tight end article. Maybe the sky is not falling as much as we have heard that it is falling, and tight ends are still an advantage. Maybe we just picked the wrong tight ends. I'm okay with admitting that I can be wrong on occasion, although Trey McBride was doing okay before he got hurt. Kelsey came back last week and did really well. I wasn't on Laporta. I wasn't on Kincaid that heavy. I was avoiding Pitts. I had a lot of Goddard thanks to you
Well, I love Goddard. I was
Thanks
taking
to
him
you,
everywhere I could
you convinced me to look at the data closer. And I
because
saw,
Philadelphia usage is one of the highest ones. And Baltimore has a nice usage, but it's a little lower this year. But that's why I wasn't afraid of Andrews, but I don't know where he was going. But I think I'd probably already picked Henry by then or Barkley. You know what I'm saying? It just wasn't working out for my drafting. Sometimes you miss on players not because you avoided them. It's just they're gone before your time's up. And a lot of times, for whatever reason, I was getting a lot of near the turn. And so I didn't get, or something else was happening. I was trying to grab somebody else. I wasn't avoiding Andrews, but I wasn't actively hunting for him either.
no, it was the draft slot that
Yeah.
directed you to what
Yeah.
you were going to get this year more than ever before. And unless you were going to take somebody much earlier than their ADP,
Yep.
you end up with a natural distribution. So, and that's one of the reasons that I say don't force the issue on
Nope.
players. Take what comes to you at a good value. But check out all that data over the scienceoffantasyfootball.com
And your
and head up.
numbers article.
Oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
forgot
you
about
forgot.
that.
Yeah, so I put that out. It's Dennis by the numbers, and the way I use the data is is there somebody there that I'm asleep on? Dennis wakes my ass up, and it's like, whoa, okay, who is? So then I go to my snaps and in other words, it inspires me because I don't have time. Like I said, I need a personal fantasy football assistant. I need my research. Dennis, I could put about 10 people to work. Okay. If ESPN would foot the bill, I'd have them going, and I'd have my dynasty interns, I'd have my guillotine, I'd have my betting prop. Dennis, I'd have a whole platoon, and we'd be just rocking and rolling. Come on, ESPN, give me a call. I'll put you boys and girls to work.
Got to get a lot of cash to get
Cash,
our
I like
to,
that
to
cash.
to support our habit here. But no, it's the by the numbers article is over there
It's
as well.
great.
I'm also going to show you folks how I manage my dynasty teams. I'm going to take four teams at random. They'll be sort of at random. There'll be one of my really best teams, one of my second tier teams, one of my middle of the pack teams, and one of my bad teams.
Now, Dennis,
Going to
I've
take
got a site. It's a random number generator site. I could put your teams in and I could do random. If you ever
ooh,
want to do that, I could do that and it would be
we might
totally random.
we we can do we'll look at doing that. I'll assign some numbers to things and we'll
Yeah.
do that. But breaking down the dynasty to give you an idea of how I manage a dynasty team. It's not the best way, not the worst way. It's my way. I want to stress that. Also, we'll have some more data by the numbers, looking at the weekly values and MVP ratings and best ball index updated after week 4. All that's coming. And of course, head on back here on Saturday for another
So
edition of the Science of Fantasy Football.
get to work, folks. Okay. Welcome to After the Show. Dennis, I thought we'd just go real quick to the snaps of Atlanta. What are you thinking? Maybe the
Ooh,
scoring, and that
yes.
we'll call that our After the Show special treats here. And then
I
let's
love
see.
it. I love it because I have a lot of decisions to make with bye
So
weeks.
Atlanta, yeah. So I am interested in Mooney and McLeod just because of their snaps and their scoring's not too bad. It's kind of that second, third tier,
Ooh,
but
yeah.
for a deep flex and an emergency. But I love my Tyler Algier. Keep going. Oh, Dennis, I have so much of him. Oh my goodness, in my best ball. And I'm just I feel extra greedy that look at that 21 doubled up on his snaps like 38. He's scoring better than Bijan. Can you imagine if somebody told you after 4 weeks that Algier was scoring per snap better than Bijan, they'd be like laughing you out of the park. And it's the case. It's truth. Look at Kyle Pitts, 38. Dennis, it's just
Ugh.
sad. That man, look, 13. That's just
I need
Dennis.
to get I need to get 40 snaps from him just to get to 5 points.
There you go. So that's yeah. Once you start doing the math like this, you can start adding it up. But look at Drake London, point two. Look at the other two. Almost, they're all the same. But you
Yeah.
had to pay a lot less for Rayway. You were tipping me on the Rayway McLeod late in the best ball drafts.
Yep.
I remember.
Yep.
And so I did, not every, because I was picking Ertz up at that time too. But I did have some him more in best ball than anything else. So
You want to know how I figured that one out?
how'd you figure that out?
Darnell Mooney is going to stretch the field.
Yes.
Okay. He's going to stretch the field. Darnell Mooney is a huge payoff when they complete a pass to him.
Yes.
He is a fast human being. Drake London is going to run kind of medium routes are going to be his specialty. And he'll take somebody deep on occasion as well. Ray McLeod is stealing from Kyle Pitts. He is just that short target guy that I thought had a shot because I didn't think I don't like those deep guys like Darnell Mooney. Okay. If most of your the longer you throw the ball, the more the defense has a chance to react. And the less chance you have of completing that pass. I know there are a lot of fantasy football analysts that live and die by air yards.
Yeah.
I do not, because I look at the complication of completing a long pass. There's more that goes into it. You need to hold off the pass rushers to have time to get your guy deep. Your guy needs to run a good route. He needs to beat the defender. The quarterback needs to throw it perfect, and the weather's got to be fine. Now, they play a lot of the games indoors. That's not a factor with weather. But Ray McLeod was going to be the only guy other than Pitts to eat up that short yardage catches. And he's done a lot of kick returning in the past. So he's got the ability to break tackles. Yep. And that's why I like Ray McLeod. It was simply Drake London's the top guy.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney's the field spreader. Who's that third guy? And it wasn't going to be Hodge. It was going to be Ray.
So, Dennis, I went ahead and I used reference class forecast. I looked at the top mainstream. There's some that are crazy. Some of these one catch wonders that skew the data. Justin Jefferson, his PPR per snap, 0.4.
Wow.
Okay. So, Drake London, if you drafted Jefferson round 1, you should have drafted London half down the road. Yes. So how about that for a surprise? Jefferson is number 1, and I'll have this data out Friday. You see, Laviska Shenault is the dog because he probably caught one pass, and maybe, I don't know if he got a touchdown. Vis Jones at Chicago, and then Corley and David Bell. You see, these are the Chenault's had 2 weeks. Just be aware, folks. If something ever happened, there's something there. Just anyway. But look at Justin Jefferson. So this is the mainstream. Godwin. Oh, were we on Godwin? Look at Reed.
Yep.
Dennis.
Oh, we're all over Reed.
Look at that. We landed, if this was ranking today going into next year, I could argue that these are your top 3. It won't be that way, but anyway, look at Nico. I mean, but anyway, so now 0.4. So folks, once you get, and I do need to
I like this Jordan Addison number 2.
Look at that. He's up.
Only played 2 weeks.
Yeah, and one of them was good. Josh Downs, welcome. And so, you just look for patterns here. And folks, I don't know I don't think we got any fours. They're gone, but we got a lot of threes. I call them, actually, Shakir is a four, Dennis, and Jefferson's a four.
Yep.
So this is another consistency metric, very scoring, touchdown based. But this may be something that I include in our beta testing next year. Make a bunch of rankings based on this. How about that? Doesn't that sound
Oh,
fun?
I absolutely love it because what you're looking at here is okay, guy gets 2/3 of the snaps.
Yep.
Average snap 67 per team. Okay.
Yep.
So if he's getting 45 snaps, it if he's locked into 45 or more snaps,
Yep.
and he's getting you point 4
45, then he's
per snap,
20,
that's an
21
eight. That
points.
yeah, that's incredible. So
Yeah, Dennis, if you want, maybe I could put predicted points out here. You
based
could
on the
put,
average
if,
snaps that they've
yeah,
taken.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or a
scoring.
median snap,
Or
some
maybe,
estimate of
I could
snaps.
calculate and come back with the median and
Yeah,
scale it that way. And we could have some rankings based just on this metric.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's going to be, put that in our ideas segment. People down on Jawan Jennings, all I'll say, he's a 3. 3 weeks, he's been in the top 25%. So don't, if somebody drops him and you've got a
Oh,
dead, if you got Brandon Cooks, I'd get Jennings. I'd take him because, he may be dropped after last week, because he did, everybody thought he was going to score 2 or 3 touch, people could get sad, or you might
he's
be able to trade him.
he's still
People,
got you like 10, 12
but
points.
I'm still saying that
Yeah.
maybe people would got sad on him.
Oh
Anyway,
yeah.
but Atlanta, like I said, you can look at the scoring of Atlanta, and we've Drake is a 2, everybody else is a 1 or 0, so that's sad. Bijan's a 3, Algiers a 2, so it's not too bad, but he's scoring more. And so Tampa Bay, let's go look real quick, and then we'll get out of here. I know we got fish to fry elsewhere, but people are getting a sense of how I play with the data. While you're watching cartoons, this is what I'm doing all fucking week. You're saying, well, how's this Bush guy beating me? Because he sits there and lives in this data world. Love Bucky Irwin, by the way. Look at that jump up, just like Algier.
Oh, loving that.
I'm putting some money for Bucky
We
Irwin.
we got a lot of Bucky.
Look at
So
that. Look at the snaps. 4-1. That is nice. The highest mainstream running back, Dennis. Well, let's see here. It would be mainstream. Derrick
Derrick
Henry,
Henry.
point
Oh,
6, 6'6".
that's
Kamara.
insane.
Look at Cook. Montgomery. Boy, is that 3 of the 4 I was all on. Look at Eckler. Kenneth Walker, Gibbs, Chase Brown, Ty Johnson. I'm all in on Ty Johnson. If Cook's, look at that, Cook and Johnson. Isn't that weird?
Chase Brown
And look
is
at Ray
out.
Davis down here. Look at they've
Oh,
got a hell of a running back crew. If any of them gets hurt, that could help the other two. Just folks,
hmm.
you heard it here first.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I actually grabbed some Ty Johnson in deep dynasty
he's on
rosters.
my dollar stream
Yeah.
play. I'll forge and hoard for him. Anyway, Tampa Bay. There it is. Scoring wise, Godwin's above Evans, 66,
Oh yeah.
53. Sterling
So my data is
Shepard
showing too.
hasn't been scoring, but look at, he jumps up out of nowhere. I guess because McMillan,
McMillan missed the game
yeah.
and
So if
Shepard,
he,
yeah.
yeah, stepped up. So just be aware. I don't
Shepard
know
was
if,
hurt at the beginning of the year, so
so it may be an extreme, got to have somebody, but I like Bucky Irwin. Cade Otton, 73. If he could ever stop scoring based on that, he could do
wow.
good. Yeah, a lot of snaps there. Can you imagine Mark Andrews with 73?
he had a good week last week though, Kate
Yeah,
Otten.
yeah,
So
yeah. But I'm just saying, imagine, yeah, this is average. But imagine Mark Andrews at 73
woo, doggy.
or even
Yeah.
50 even. So anyway, that gives people an idea. And again, notice I am framing this data with metrics, other metrics. Okay. Nothing's in a vacuum. This is the best I can do without AI and whatnot. And frankly, I know we saw some AI folks, Dennis. My problem, I don't know who these people are. And AI can give you a lot of gibberish if it's not done right. In other words, it's not something, people can cook in their basement, like meth or something down for Breaking Bad and just get you enough to get high. I don't know who these people are inventing these things. I want to
Well,
see some data science PhD level hardcore. Okay, let's test it. Show me, several years of testing. I want we may Dennis, you and I may be fighting against AI in a few years, and that's going to be sad. I mean, folks, is that what you want to do? Just kind of robot it out, and so you can
I'm
swill your beer? That's
yeah,
sad.
I'm
That's,
I'm not worried about that because I remember the first and still most accurate thing when
mhm.
it comes to computer generated stuff. Garbage in, garbage out.
That's right. Garbage in, garbage out. That's
And
right.
I see that same mentality with this data that, hey, it's only as good as the input that it's given because it's not thinking on its own, but it'll do a great job of consolidating the data that you tell it to look at.
Yep.
But if you don't tell, if the person programming it
Yep.
to go find the data doesn't know beans about fantasy football, it's not going to be very valuable.
I hear you. Well, I think that's the end of the after show. I'm gonna stop this recording. Wasn't that fun, Dennis? Woo woo.
You are turning into quite the host